the plan is this. The military will back, and believe me, you got to have the military involved. Whether you like it or not doesn't make a difference. Now, there's a difference. You do have good guys and bad guys no matter where you go. There are more good guys than there are bad guys in the military. I have found very few that are actually really evil, even in the bad guys. Some of them ain't too cool to be around, but most of them are pretty great people. I fully support, as a veteran, I fully support our troops, period. So does everybody in this movement.
I would say that people join the military to pledge their lives to defend and protect the Constitution and the people.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not out there to enhance the lifestyles and comfort of the rich and famous. Or those who don't wish to be famous, but who are oligarchs who basically are living off of everyone else.
Yes.
That's not what they did it for. And everybody, if all you have to do is watch a few of these Illuminati propaganda films to realize that if you do work for these people, they will stab you in the back almost as a law of nature. So anybody who thinks that working with them is a good move, wait until what happens when you're no longer useful and see how quickly they'll torture and kill you and everyone you care about.
Well,
nobody is immune from that. But to get to the deeper grain of what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm getting that you had this package delivered to The Hague, and that was the critical moment in which those on the inside were aware that these mass arrests that have been planned ever since the 5-inch document you saw in 1979 could actually move forward by the will of the civilians in terms of common law going back to the Code of Hammurabi and 11,000-year-old documents.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
What this did was, when they received it and it got past their agents who work at The Hague, what it did was they knew that it had arrived because that person was made aware. There was nothing they could do about it. So consequently, their protection evaporated. This is like steam on a hot highway, and the sun comes out, and poof, it's gone. Okay, well, there's thousands of resignations in Europe to date. Now, in 1 week, and I'm talking last week, there was 450 resignations, retirements, and this stuff, and 200 arrests.
That's a staggering number.
That's 650 people involved in finance. Now, here's the difference. Those people under house arrest or who have been taken into custody or who retired and are staying at home are considered not very important one way or the other. They are primarily figureheads and not much more.
Right.
The difference is those who were arrested and those who are being arrested and those who are going to be arrested, that's the second layer of the onion.
This is why we're not seeing a lot of newspaper and website articles about this, because there's no accountability of these people getting arrested in the outside world because they don't have a public position.
Well, not only that, but the mainstream media is controlled by them.
Exactly.
Therefore, you're not going to hear this.
Yeah, and I documented that extensively in my investigation, Financial Tyranny. It goes back to Operation Mockingbird and traceable information regarding the Masonic Order and guys who in 1826 were saying, yeah, we own the press and we own the judiciary and we own the police and we own the government and F you if you don't like it.
Yeah. Basically, there's nothing you can do about it. People have alluded to the fact that there's something out there everybody's afraid of in terms of industrialists, people of power. This is basically what they were afraid of. That's
Woodrow Wilson's quote in his book, The New Freedom. Yes, very important quote.
Exactly. Now, the thing is that what people didn't realize was the limitation of, you mentioned the G5, I'm going to say the G20.
Okay.
And the reason I say the G20 is that some of these nations have not quite come to the light yet that they got a real serious problem or how serious it is, and they're not fully under the control or fully beholding to or involved with the G5. So they're kind of on the edge, and they can go either way. And the basis of this is very simple. Several things have happened. Number one, we convinced enough people to abide by documentation done the correct way, and we submitted it to the Hague in terms of a majority of states, which basically set a precedent for being free and for military-civilian action. The military backs us up by way of federal marshals who contact local law enforcement, and local law enforcement actually makes the arrests. These guys, there's a lot of these guys out there. They're very well trained. They're very knowledgeable.
And they're not
ordinarily professional.
And they're not soldiers.
No, that's the neat part about this. They're in between the civilian and the military.
Right.
Okay, now, you've got those three entities, the military, federal marshal, local law enforcement. What our paperwork did was to give the military civilian authority to contact the federal marshals, to contact local law enforcement, and have a big party for all these arrests.
Wow.
This does not include any military coup, does not include any military action, and it does not include martial law. None of that is going to happen. What is going to happen, you will see federal marshals backing up local law enforcement, taking people into custody, and there may be a stand of troops in case they need extra bodies to snatch somebody that decides to run, or there's a whole bunch of people in a building, and they didn't know that there was 7,000 of them in there. You're going to need extra hands in order to incarcerate all these people, put them on the bus, and send them wherever they need to go. So this is the military will act in a backup fashion in some ways.
Does that violate posse comitatus?
No, because the military is not acting as a police force directly.
They're assisting a police action.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And the police action is one of control of and or prevention of rioting or general civil disobedience that would call for a police situation. These are all, you have to look all this stuff up. A regular protest of citizenry basically can be met with general police force, but when the people that called out the National Guard on several occasions during things that were a problem have found that they acted illegally. And they were told, don't ever do that again. There were a lot of people who were informed that this is a no-no and this is okay and don't you cross that line.
Sure.
Okay, so you've got these three entities. Now, back to the plan. The plan stipulates several things. One, you're not going to have police state. You're not going to have the military in control. It's not martial law. And they're not going to come in the house and snatch you up. That ain't happening. What's happening is this. The intent and purpose of this plan was to minimize the chaos involved in the action. Now, when you arrest several thousand people in a city, it's going to create a little bit of a hubbub. People are going to see the military. They're going to see a lot of policemen doing the job. And this will be on video. I mean, you're going to have CNN and all the local news people. Everybody's going to have some kind of video of this stuff.
And I assume these policemen will probably be in riot gear, which will have black uniforms and scary-looking stuff.
Maybe. It depends on whether or not they expect problems with who they're dealing with. Generally, no, because it's not a riot situation.
Okay.
It could turn that way. They'll bring the gear. I mean, it'll be in the trunk most likely. Most of your people that have been responsible for the problems are office-type people. They're not necessarily physically active or capable. And to go along with that, they're not going to torture them or, he fell down 14 flights of stairs or any of that.
Well, and I've heard from my own insider that there are an astonishing number of very deeply embedded moles who are much closer to these people than they ever thought anybody would get, and actually not have been outed.
Exactly. Now, there's a couple of things in this. First of all, the gist of the plan is to not create chaos. In other words, you're going to have public announcements. People such as yourself and myself will be notified approximately a day ahead of schedule in terms of putting this on the internet so it can go viral.
Okay.
I would imagine doing this interview, this is going to get kind of virally. Well,
very much so. Some of my videos have millions of views, and this will be distributed throughout hundreds, if not thousands, of different blogs and reposted. And if we let people know that there's going to be a one-day window of notification, you can absolutely guarantee that there will be a massive tidal wave of publicity once this moment arrives.
Well, that moment arrives when we are given the green light to notify our people, the ones that we have contact with. At that point, then, it is to go viral on the internet, and we're to try to access as much mainstream media, be that AM radio or whatever, doesn't matter, but it's as much as we can.
Now, I would imagine that the oligarchs, who are the bad guys, are going to be hearing this and saying to people and getting them to listen to this, getting their soldiers and their mercenaries to listen to this and say, you got to get these SOBs because they're trying to overthrow the government.
No. What we are doing in terms of the action that's going to be taken, and I'm not talking about us or our actions are only a part of the plan. The plan basically is to arrest these people. No destruction, no firefights, no gunplay, or any kind of violence if possible. The idea of this is no chaos, no violence, and a legal way to do it, a lawful manner in which to conduct the operation. This has been coming since George Washington made federal districts out of our innocent group of 13 colonies. So what you have to look at is that the plan also offers protections of keeping the lights on, making sure the internet works, and that the phone does, and you can flush the toilet. You can go to work and not have to worry about it.
Right. We've heard from other insiders, in fact, it was from the one you met on the phone with me, that these people since the 80s, and I mean the conspirators now, the bad guys, they have elaborate plans to blow up a whole bunch of bridges and wipe out power and wipe out sewage and wipe out water in the event that anything like this were to happen to them. And I also know, however, that there are so many moles and so many people who will not stand by and let this happen that if they think they're going to be able to do this, they're sorely mistaken. But they may try, and there may be certain levels of disruption that will need to be prevented, as you're saying.
Well, there's basically going on right now tactical positioning. And I mean right this minute. The tactical positioning is being done in such a manner that nobody's going to be the wiser. These are regular people they see every day. They have no idea that that person happens to be an agent for the good guys, as you say, moles, or however you want to look at that. Okay. The irrespective as to what the fearmongers will tell you, the bad guys have lost enough funds and lost enough support, and there are enough people that are upset with them that their powers have been curtailed tremendously.
Well, look, Drake, they wouldn't have done those bailouts if they could have possibly avoided it. That was an astonishing move that really showed that they are just absolutely grasping at straws. And it's like Wile E. Coyote when he's paddling in the air and he doesn't realize he's falling yet.
Exactly. To give you an example of how desperate they are, they just had a couple of executive orders from their main lackey in the White House saying that they got rights to everything.
I'm well aware of that, and it's utterly astonishing. The only thing I can think of is these guys are so desperate and they're so lacking in common sense that they think that even at this late stage in the game that they can be in this poker bluff and actually get people to think that they could have the boots on the ground to enforce these ridiculous executive orders.
Well, then you've got the NDAA, which didn't help. Now, basically, as you're saying, the idea is to foster fear within the freedom movement and primarily within the citizenry.
Well, it's working very well.
Well, I'm glad to see people stand up and start taking these things to task, at least.
Yeah.
That shows that there are some people out there that do have some guts. Primarily, though, you have to remember that these are last gasp efforts. The only thing they've got left is, at this point, mostly control of the press, and they're losing their grips on that, as well as this sort of shake the bush to see if the rabbit comes out.
Well, and as I was saying, you have to have people to hold the guns.
Well, I addressed, anybody who wants to listen to it, I addressed the troops. That's active duty, reserve, retired, and disabled. That is, again, on the website, freedomreigns.us. And the basic thing that I have heard from active duty troops is that they have two things that concern them. The first one is that they disobey orders. It doesn't matter whether it's lawful or not, that they're going to be kicked out of the military. Well, there ain't any jobs out there, and if these guys ain't got skills, they're screwed. And they realize this, so they're a little bit fearful of that. The other part is that if somebody decides to declare martial law, 90% of them, give or take, are going to go AWOL. And they're taking their equipment with them and going home. Now,
90%?
Well, somewhere between 80 and 90% are saying, no, that ain't happening. We're not going to go after somebody's grandma with a combat weapon. That's stupid, okay? That's ridiculous. Well, what you have to remember is that there's a difference between lawful and unlawful orders or directives. The unlawful order or directive will tell you to go against what you know to be the truth according to the Constitution. So, how well did I was just following orders hold up at the Nuremberg trials? It didn't. Everybody that did that got convicted. This is not considered a plausible defense, simply because you know the difference between torturing somebody and not. The field manual states that you're not to engage civilians. That means you're not supposed to step on them, etc. All of this has been covered. Now, I'm going to give you an example from Vietnam called the My Lai Massacre. Okay, there was not too much done with that, but the problem was that several people came up with that exact defense, and the court-martial said, no, that don't fly, period. Now, they lucked out, and I mean this literally, they lucked out, because a court-martial that deals with the taking of civilian life also carries the death penalty.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So they were lucky they didn't get executed. And I mean all of them, because everybody that was involved is up for the death penalty under those conditions. And it's not up to me, that's military code. And I agree with that, primarily. Torturing people and that sort of thing is not necessary. You're not going to get good information anyway. Now, if you make somebody think that you might torture them, and you talk to them and say, well, do you really want me to do that? And they'll say, no. And you say, well, then tell me what you know. Okay. And off you go down the road, and they'll tell you, okay, you wait a little while. You treat them correctly. Give them a little something, a little water to drink, maybe a little food to eat. You come back and ask them a second time, look, that was all BS. We're not going to do anything to you. Can you talk to me about what's going on? Yeah, man, and then you get the real information. But torturing somebody, you tell them anything, make it quit. Right. You'll make up whatever is going to stop it. It's about as accurate as somebody's imagination. It's that simple.
So if a soldier in the United States military has a commanding officer with bulging earthworm on his forehead, screaming both sets of teeth, top and bottom of the iris, screaming in his face, you have to obey this order, and he does so, he's liable for federal court-martial.
Exactly.
So it might be easier, you think, to say yes when somebody's screaming in your face, but you're also describing a majority of the United States military that already supports these mass arrests. And so if you were on the losing side, you're in a minority. And if this mass arrest works, which it very much looks like it will, then you're going to be held accountable.
Exactly. You may have a few opposing forces, but there shouldn't be many. The situation is simple. I know of an incident in Vietnam where a unit was told to wipe out a friendly village. And it was called, back then in the day, a search and destroy mission. Search and destroy means that you go through a village at several levels. We were told to go through at level 1. The level 1 search and destroy means you kill everything that lives, and you burn, mangle, torture, whatever kind of physical structures you find, to include statues or anything. And you leave a burnt spot, basically, with dead bodies laying around. Well, the problem was that I was involved in this, and I knew some of those people, and so did a lot of the other troops. And we told the captain no. And he said, yes, you will. And that's when we pointed our guns at him. Some of the guys, there was a few, who decided, well, yeah, I guess, killing good, because that's what we're here for, so let's go. And we pointed our guns at them and said, no, you ain't.
Wow.
About a few minutes, and it only took a few minutes. You're going to really shoot me? The captain's asking these guys, well, are we going to go down here and shoot people that are friendlies? And he said, well, I'm not sure. Hold on a minute. A couple of minutes later, the orders changed. And the incident was never reported.
Wow. And you were there. You witnessed this.
Yes. This happened a lot in a lot of cases, simply because it ain't cool to do this. Once you get to know somebody and you find out that they're real people, irrespective as to the differences, that message with you. You remember these things. So I don't see it as a right. Here we are. We're extraordinarily wealthy. We got the best weapons in the world. We're going to take automatic weapons, M16s, and grenades, and go through it and kill everybody? Well, you give me a good reason, and I'll consider that. If somebody's shooting at me, that's different. This was my reason for wanting to abscond with a politician, bring him over and run him through a couple of ice baths, eat patties, get him a couple of good sets of leeches going on his butt, and put him back. Give him some kind of first-hand taste.
And these people you're describing are the ones that you were given the Category 1 seek and destroy orders against.
Yes, and we told them no. Most of the people in our unit knew for a fact that these were friendlies. We had dealt with them. They invite us in and would feed us when they didn't have any food hardly.
I mean, what was the reasoning? Did you guys try to understand why they would want this done? I mean, what could possibly...
Never did find out the reason for the order. The orders were arbitrary in a lot of cases.
Right.
There's a book about Vietnam called The Bright and Shining Lie, and I suggest everybody get a hold of a copy of it, and it will give you a good idea as to what kind of a mess that was. Now, what we're dealing with here is something a little different. A lot of people say, ooh, insurrectionist. No, because you're not trying to infiltrate a government and take it over. You're not an invader. You're not trying to bring a bunch of people in, unlike certain people in certain agencies that like to play games with guns across the border down south. Unlike those people, you're not trying to do any of that. It's not illegal because it's a notification process only. But it does give the military the authority, in terms of the civilian authority, under the Constitution, to take action according to the betterment of our way of life. This restores the American dream of mom and apple pie, being able to be peaceful and not have to worry about a whole lot of things.
Well, I would assume that the majority of retired personnel from the military, active personnel from the military, special forces, black operations guys, that most of the people who are hearing this are going to realize that if something like this starts to happen, they want to be involved. But right now, they're feeling like they've been given the mushroom treatment. They're sitting in the dark being fed a lot of BS. And let's assume that most of these people want to get involved, they want to know what to do once the time comes, what do you tell them?
Look at it in terms of following the constitutional premise of lawful order. A lawful order will not put you into a police situation. It does not call for roadblocks. It does not call for martial law. It does not in any way interfere directly with the civilian population and its operation. What a lawful order does is it allows you to stay out of those areas in such a fashion that you can carry out whatever duty it is. And it could be any kind of a thing. It could be playing war games or whatever, maneuvers. You might go down and assist somebody with logs. You never know. It could be strictly a preparedness or ready training thing. Well, we got to get these guys ready, see how quick they can get their gear, put them in the truck, take them over here, and can you hump up over that hill? How long does that take? These kinds of things are lawful orders. If there were to be an invasion, and I understand that that's been offered and turned down, the difference between that is you're going to have people trying to come across the border for the strict purpose of taking you out. That's different. The other part of this was I was requested to contact as many of the underground as I could, to include militias, to include freedom groups, to include the people by themselves that just happen to have a gun, or kind of like me, too much hillbilly, too red over the neck, and I got too many guns and live in the woods. The premise for my contacting those people was to tell them to get ready, because this is coming. It's not going to be stopped. And it's coming a lot sooner than people think. And the other part of it is, don't, under any circumstances, engage our military. That's not what this is about. You find out from them, what's up? Oh, we're just going down here. Okay. Sometimes some of these people will be contacted to assist them. In other words, this is going to be an all-out effort in this country, and it's going to take a lot of people. There are a considerable number who need to be removed from office or their responsibilities and contained, retained, and arrested. Now, my understanding is they're planning to populate the FEMA camps with all these dinks, and I feel that's appropriate. They build them for us. Now they go take a camping trip in them.
Karma is a bitch.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that. Okay, afterwards, doing this is not, to me, as extraordinarily anxietal as a lot of people would think. I'm not as concerned with this part of it as I am what comes after. There's going to be some interruption. In other words, you need to get some extra toilet paper and a few extra canned goods, and I'm talking about have enough for, say, a month or two. And that should basically cover the lapse in time. Not all the trucks are going to be running. So there's grocery that gets cleaned out when everybody thinks that the world's gone mad, or like they do during a hurricane.
Right.
Then, if it doesn't get resupplied, what are you going to do? Well, this is why we got extra food. This is why a lot of people up here do. This is why people up here raise their own gardens. Simply, you can stuff and you put it up. And having that extra not only is less expensive than going to the grocery, but just in case something does screw up real bad, and it's coming, for the, say, 10 days, I don't know how many people consider the importance of this, but to me, being civilized does equate to the use of certain hygienic items, and one of those that I know of that to me is extraordinarily important is simple, plain old toilet paper. It might behoove people to think about not being able to go down to the grocery when you run out and get some more. And I'm going to tell you, newspaper doesn't make it. It's hard on certain things that you don't want to rough up. Well, very simply, you have to think in terms of what do you use, okay, and what do you use commonly, and what are the convenience items that might not be part of a shipment that does make it through, okay, or does get to you, it's not considered a survival level item. Well, toilet paper, simple tissues for your nose, sanitary napkins for ladies.
And people can subsist on simple rice and beans. You know, all these elaborate products that a lot of these freedom sites are selling are not really necessary. I mean, it might make it more comfortable, but if somebody's really at poverty level, you can get by with just buying some kidney beans and some brown rice and just keep that in your pantry.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't take a lot. The idea is this, okay? Lay up some extra toilet paper. If you're lucky, find it on sale, go at it that way. If you find something that you know really tastes extraordinarily good, but it's $1.49 and they got the other ones for 2 for $1, take the 2 for $1. It's not that much different, and you can make out just fine on it. Add a little bit of spices to it, and you're good. But anyway, the survival part I don't think is going to be all that critical, and I'll tell you why. The plan itself reiterates many times, the portion that I read, that this is to be a non-interruptive, non-chaotic, peaceful, meaning non-shooting type of an action. And that is an extraordinary difference between all these people out here saying, oh boy, rosin up your gun, get your bullets out, you know, praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, they're coming. Well, yeah, they're going down the road because they need to go over and secure the power plant that the bad guys would like to blow up.
And I would also encourage people, because I know, as I said, there are many people out there who are playing a game, and the game is that everything they hear must not be true. So they're going to say every single thing this guy Drake is saying is not true, and this is all a pretext for martial law and for New World Order. So I would say to them, and you can address them as well, but I want to say something first, and that is, let's realistically consider that if arrests start to be made and that evidence is provided, that is progress no matter what. Even if it is ultimately, and that might be as far as they could think of it in their own mind, one negative faction against another negative faction. The fact is, let's be honest, how many bankers went to jail during the bailouts? How many people have ever been held accountable for anything? If we start seeing real accountability, by God, that's progress, and I don't care what you think. You've got to be able to see that it's a step forward no matter what. If you start seeing mass arrests, something has changed, and it breaks out of that thing that goes back to the Masons, which is everybody who's in on it gets a free pass.
Exactly. My suggestion is to, yes, be ready, but also relax, be calm, cool, and collected, and slow to pull the trigger. Unless somebody acts unfriendly towards you, I wouldn't necessarily take any aggressive action toward them. Wait and see. Yeah, you can let them walk right up to you. It doesn't matter. As I said, this plan calls for a combination of the things that our original documents call for. And the basis of this is to officially remove those people who tax you to death for no good reason other than to put it in their pocket. This is to remove the private central banking system. This is to remove a whole load of regulations and regulatory agencies that don't serve any purpose other than control. In other words, this is the freedom. Now, with that freedom comes the responsibility of being what you're supposed to be to everybody that you come across. This is contained in the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Say hi to somebody. Wouldn't you like somebody to say hi and wave at you? It feels good, okay?
Well, let me also point out that in my book, The Source Field Investigations, I quote from the American Federation of Scientists, which says that there's been over 5,000 patents that were classified for national security, and this includes automatically any patent that gets above 70% efficiency at converting energy is automatically classified. So what that means is anybody who invents anything that could challenge oil, you will never see it. Well, and all that stuff needs to be released. And I know that that's part of what you all are planning on doing here.
Well, that's part of the plan, but some of that is already coming out, too.
Right.
And the reason for that is that the bad guys, I'll say, have lost a considerable amount of a combination of of things. One of those is their power base. They can't say, well, I'm the mucky muck, do so, and have it done. The other part is they don't have the cash on hand, the finances, to pay the bad guys that work for them.
Yeah, mercenaries don't work if you don't pay their salary.
Exactly. So you get a situation where they have lost most of their power. They're beginning to lose most of the finance. And I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, to wake up tomorrow morning and find out that the nation had been clamped down. Now, that clampdown is complete. The satellite systems will not work. You will not be allowed to make international calls. There's going to be no traffic in or out of the United States, period.
Now, hang on, Drake, because you said that it would be a court-martialing offense and unlawful orders if any soldiers would block roads. And now you're saying that air traffic is going to be blocked. How do those two things line up?
Hold on and listen.
Okay.
This is a neat one. The closure, of our national borders does come under the military auspices of control. They are allowed to do so in the event of extraordinary circumstances. This extraordinary circumstance deals with the freedom of our country. And the crooks who would take every last dime in this country with them when they decided to run for the hills.
Well, yeah, and the average person has now heard about Muppetgate, where this guy Greg Smith, who was an executive chairman at Goldman Sachs, comes forward and says that he saw internal memos and that the prevailing climate there was toxic and destructive, and that the only thing they cared about was sucking as much money out of their clients as they could, and they called them Muppets, which is a British term that means a stupid, ignorant person.
Well, if you want to get down to the crux of it, I rather imagine most people remember the great fall of the stock market back 07, 08.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. One of the reasons it went as deep as it did, and we were lucky, one of the reasons it went as deep as it did was that trillions of dollars were automatically sent electronically out of the country. This was noticed because there are people that watch this thing called stock watch, money followers, things of that nature. And it automatically set off an alarm, which a guy noticed, and their communications got cut. Or it would have been a 1933 all over again. They did save us that much.
You're saying trillions with a T were flying out of the country?
Yes, and this happened within a matter of about 7 minutes.
Jesus.
Okay, now, the reason that the satellites are going to be turned off is to protect us from that.
I see.
The reason for no international travel is to keep the bankers from loading up a Learjet and taking off. If they do so, they will be shot down. This is going to be a complete total clampdown for a period of 72 hours, if need be. Now, it should take about 24 hours for the sweep necessary, mass arrest and all this stuff. Secondary sweep will probably take another 5 or 6 to make sure they got all the records necessary to convict these people. The other part of this is that there are certain areas that are sensitive that may contain explosive charges of varying kinds in order to blow up a record. You've seen a lot of these in movies lately where they blow things up and there's big balls of fire. Well,
absolutely.
That sort of explosive takes out records like you wouldn't believe. Okay, so in order to protect against that, this is the reason, for the closure. Now, this is a limited operation. At the time that they know that it is cleared, that the military portion of the action has been culminated, then, and I say military, the military backs the federal marshals who use the local police, etc. Okay. After that action is taken, we are going to have about a day's time to make sure that this goes viral on the internet. Hey, guess what? Look at this. And there will be some video supplied, as I understand it. I didn't know about this until just the other day.
Well, I may be talking out of school here, but I think you're underestimating it when you say the word some. I have been informed that there are DVDs upon DVDs worth of productions, some of which involve some very famous names that people will immediately recognize narrating these productions. And these productions will be apparently airing on television, nothing else, for 5 days running. And it's going to be wall to wall, and they're going to just be educating people about everything they need to know. That's what I heard.